Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 64 of Circle of Fellows. I'm Shel Holtz, IABC Fellow, and I'm Director of Internal Communications at WebCorps in San Francisco and moderator for today's session, which is all about the role that communicators can play in establishing, maintaining, and evolving a corporate environment. We'll even define what that means. Not too long, but want to introduce the panel, or more accurately, ask the panel to introduce themselves. And I'm just going to go clockwise as I see you all, which means I'm starting with you, Ned.
Thanks, Shel, and good day, everyone. I'm Ned Lundquist. I'm here in Springfield, Virginia. I'm a communicator, a writer. I have a number of clients. I work for a company called MCR part-time, and I have my own company called Echo Bridge, which services clients, and glad to be here.
And next up is Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Hills in Chicago, and I'm principal of Hyman Hills Marketing Group, and I also serve as adjunct faculty in Loyola University's Global Stratcom Master's program. So still the double edge, just can't give that up. But one of these days I will retire. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat.
I don't know this word, retire.
I know. I think that's probably good.
Mark, you're up.
Hey there. My name is Mark Schumann. I'm in today from Houston, Texas, where I work as an executive coach. And this topic is very close to my heart, having just spent a few years as the head of culture for a technology company here in Texas. And we worked every day to try to make it a more positive environment for our folks. So I can't wait to hear from my fellow panelists today.
Wonderful. And last but definitely not least is Lety.
Hi, everybody. Well, I'm Lety Narvaez. I'm based in Mexico City, and I have my own company called Narvaez Group. We get consultancy on corporate communications, employee communications, social responsibility, and reputation management. I'm very glad to be here.
Glad you're with us, Lety. And let's jump into the topic. In the description that we shared for this topic, we talked about how the environment is when, where, and how you work. Talked about the fact that there are some experts out there who label different types of environments: an artistic environment, an enterprising environment, a conventional environment. Really, what is a corporate environment, and is it confined just to corporations?
I'll jump in. I think that it's anytime you have any group together. We're a group of 5 people this morning with others who are listening and watching, and we're our own group during this period. I've always looked at it, and certainly did during these most recent years, is the environment or the experience. It's the outcome of every touch point that someone has. It's everything that happens to me from the moment I begin my work at the start of the day to when I end. It's every interaction. It's everything that contributes to my looking in the mirror and saying, do I feel good about where I'm working, the work I'm doing, and how does it make me feel about myself? And I think ultimately it's an emotional decision. It's an emotional choice. And it's ultimately the outcome of doing a lot of smart things. And as communicators, we're really well equipped to help organizations do those things.
And Mark, I think it would be safe to say that people that do feel good about the place that they work are better performers. Would that be safe to say that those people who are engaged, understand the corporate vision, understand the purpose, feel more productive, and are better employees?
Absolutely, and it's very simple in some ways. And the way that that I look at it is that we all deserve to feel good about what we do, and to believe that we have contributed our best work to an organization we believe in. And so if we keep as communicators that experience, that reaction in mind, I think it helps direct just what you described, how we help create, sustain, and nurture that experience.
And I also think that that corporate environment is directly linked to the culture of the organization, and the culture is all this toolkit of practices, beliefs, everything we do within the organization. That's part of the culture. So that's quite important to consider when we as communicators need to participate and work directly to influence this culture and to be aligned with the culture in which we live.
And hopefully it's a good culture and a genuine culture, right? Because there are probably companies that say that they're a great place to work, that they're wonderful people, they have a great purpose in life, and they're making the world better, and everybody who works here is contributing to peace, love, and understanding. But that's not always the case. And so the communication aspect of that has to be very genuine.
And I think you've hit a very important point, Ned, because I think this is also where we have to be careful. As communicators, we're great storytellers, and sometimes that means we know how to spin a yarn, as they say. If that yarn happens to be about an organization where the experience we describe isn't what people actually experience, then we're not contributing to the culture. In fact, we're diluting the actual experience that people have. And so I think it's critical that when we bring our skills to this, we keep in mind that we're as accountable for the experience that's built as for how that experience is shared.
And I would also broaden what I think the traditional definition of a corporate environment is. And so we've seen proof that this is happening, in the last decade, where it's, the naked corporation, right? Books like that said, oh my gosh, there is no line between inside the company and the marketplace it operates in and it exists in. And I think that if we look at doing any type of change, whether it's culture or anything, I think what we really need to do is to look at that corporate environment through the stakeholder lens, because the corporate environment is about all the stakeholders. And so the culture, transcends every single thing that is done. And I think as we move from supposedly the shareholder model, right, which we've all been saying to be away from, and we even had the business roundtable last year, I believe, voted to move to the stakeholder model. I think that even in the way that we talk about corporate communications and what that means, I think we need to look at it through that stakeholder, all the stakeholders that the corporation touches.
And Mary, as we do that, I think we have to look through the lens of leadership and look at the role of leadership. I laugh and say the easiest words for a leader to say are, I want to change the culture. Well, yeah, I'd like to change my car, and I'd like to change my clothes, and I'd like to change how my lawn grows. But I can't simply do that by saying it. And most of the times when someone says that to me, I want to change the culture, I said, okay, let's look at you. Because the culture is a reflection of those who lead, and culture is 99% about leadership. And if the leaders aren't believing and aren't delivering what's authentic, then it's really difficult for that environment to be what they might want it to be.
And that's where the communicator comes in, because leadership and communication are inseparable. Right. And this is where the leader can depend and work very closely with the communication team to help convey what the vision is, or like I like to call personify and exemplify. So Mark, you talked about telling those little stories. Yeah. We can sometimes a vision or a culture or an ideal, a core value, those can sometimes be very hard to make tangible. But you can take an example of a real person who's acting that way, acting through that type of virtue that you're trying to get the whole company to grab hold of, And that becomes the role of a communicator. The other thing that the communicator can do, communication is a two-way process, and half of that is listening, and the communicator can go back to leadership and say, hey, we're not connecting, we're not getting this message across. We need to revise, revisit, change our methodology, our tools, whatever.
And I really, and Ned, you're so right. I really believed that in the role of the head of culture, the most important thing I brought, the most essential communication skill that I brought to work every day, was that ability to listen, was that ability to absorb what I would hear, that ability then to curate it and then communicate it back to everyone throughout the organization. I mean, we affectionately call this at my company the Culture Club, because every month we would spend hours and hours talking with hundreds of people throughout the organization, and our purpose was, as we often say in IABC, to create a platform where every voice could be heard. And our taking what people are expressing and sharing that throughout the organization, most importantly the leadership, is vital to any culture moving forward.
Yes, I completely agree with you, Mark. And I also think that that's why it's so important that the communicator works very hand in hand with human resources in order to promote a continuous training for leaders, in order to ensure that the leaders really lead with empathy, that they know how to reconnect and to connect with their teams, because that's the basis for be aligned with the culture of the company. So leading resilient leadership, especially, for example, in these pandemic times, is quite relevant, and it's a priority. So the communicator must work very, very close with human resources and foster this training to ensure that not only the top leaders, but also the other leaders down are being aligned and work closely with their teams.
Well, and I think that
Ned's muted. He needs to.
That's all right. I'll just jump in. No problem. But I think another component in today's organization, and even, in December of 2020, I and having worked in leadership for decades, and teach change in leadership and work with Fortune companies, in change in leadership, I think the one thing that we're trying to foster now is the whole idea of followership. And saying followership has a tremendous opportunity right now to also bring this culture, this environment into this socio-emotional positive experience that it could be. And putting a little bit more emphasis, because, the way that we've worked, since last, March, more so of us, we're working in those kind of sidebar teams. So we leave and we work over here, and we've got these little pods, that are making up this corporation at this point. And in those small groups, you can realize the followers have of a leader to really control that environment themselves and to make it do what it needs to do. So I think looking at probably, the people that are part of that corporate environment and providing them the opportunity to be that, discursive follower, that person who can participate, I think is going to really move the needle on culture change, which has been traditionally a long-term project.
And you think, Mary, of where we are. This is December 2020. Who could have imagined? We've talked about this so much during the year, but I've had so many people ask the question the past few months, what do I do with my culture now? And how do I make certain that the culture I had before March of 2020 continues as we move out of this period into whatever follows next? And I think that this is where our communication skills are so essential for this conversation. because unless we use those skills to deeply explore the connection that people have to an organization and how much it relied upon the brick and the mortar and how much it relied upon traditions that have all changed with this move to a more virtual experience. And how do we make certain that through the screens that we all rely on today, we still have the opportunity as leaders and managers to let people know we care? And so I think the questions that any organization should ask have only been intensified by the change that COVID and this period have brought us.
And Lety mentioned a really important thing. She mentioned empathy, and empathy is a virtue that you can't fake.
No.
I don't think you might be able to fake it for a little while, but if you're working in a company that used to be where the manager could get up and walk around and say, "How you doing, everybody? Everybody doing okay?" That's harder to do now. But you can still do it. A manager, a leader can still, in a genuine way, keep in touch with the associates so that they feel somebody does care about me. The company does care about me. My welfare, even here at home alone, they're still reaching out and they're still keeping that connective tissue with the organization. And therefore, I feel glad to be a part of that. So, Lety, you're right. Empathy is a key.
Yes, and yes, in relation to that, leading with empathy, I think that leaders need to also express compassion for the human side now, and more than ever. And we need to be to show that empathy, acknowledging that this is an unprecedented time, that we are also humans as leaders. Be conscious of people where are they emotionally. Emphasize learning goals and efforts. Even emotionally proofreading, for example, our emails. It's very different to write an email demanding than asking for something. And we must be aware that the content, that the narrative, the messages that we are using, we need to be very, very, very cautious of how we transmit that message, especially during this time, in order to be aware of how people see us as leaders and how they will take the messages, the timing, the way we express ourselves. All of those messages are so important.
And within that, Lety, there's real opportunity. I mean, we can look at so much of what has been difficult about this year, but then there's been real opportunity. The great thing about the virtual environment in which we all work in every day now is that it's such a level playing field. There is no longer a head of the table because there isn't a table. There's no longer the old question of, do I get a seat at the table? Because as long as I have a box on the screen, I have a seat at the table. And so this has been such an opportunity for there to be equal volume for all voices. And I think one of the things, again, that as communicators, we need to help organizations look at what did we learn during this that we don't want to lose track of? What did we learn about ourselves? What did we learn about the importance of connecting with our colleagues? What did we learn about how we work? I mean, overnight in March, people had to learn how to work, take care of their children, educate their children, do all the things that we used to be able to compartmentalize in our lives at the same time. And we need to learn and build on how good that has felt to accomplish what we've been able to still push through and accomplish this year.
And there's no going back. There are things about this work from home type environment that's not going to go away as soon as everybody's been vaccinated. I think there are good things about being back in the workplace together, but we're also going to be doing a lot of things virtually. I can't wait to, I used to travel a lot. I haven't seen an airport since March 1st, since I came home from being a IABC Gold Quill judge in London, and I missed my traveling. But until then, we've done conferences virtually. We've done meetups virtually. We've done work meetings virtually, and it works. And when you say level playing field, also, Mark, it's not just within our company we're kind of levelized, but the whole world is faced with the same pandemic. It's not just we're stuck in this work environment and our competitors aren't. We're all stuck in this situation. The pandemic is universal.
And IABC has already announced that the 2021 conference will be virtual next June. Not waiting to see if everything will be ready for return to the real world. I have a two-part question for y'all. And let me set it up. I work for a construction company, and a couple of years ago, we renovated our headquarters office in San Francisco with the goal, a goal we achieved, by the way, of a WELL certification. This is all about sustainability through an organization that comes in and does all kinds of testing and then gives you this certification. We have green walls, lots of plants in the wall, lots of plants throughout the building. We have standing desks for everybody that'll raise and lower. The lighting has been chosen carefully. The carpeting has no materials in it that don't conform to the idea of sustainability. Every vendor that provided goods to the building, they take it back when it's lived its life, and they repurpose it or dispose of it in a sustainable way. And there's a lot of wellness built into the facility as well in terms of healthy snacks and the like. So yeah, first question is really, when I think of environment, the first thing that pops into my mind is the physical environment. Is that really important, and what can communicators do to promote the appropriate physical environment? And the second part of the question is, now that many of us are working from home, how do you carry that kind of approach to the environment into the homes of your employees? I mean, I talk to people in my organization who don't have spare room to use as an office, like I'm lucky enough to. They've got their laptop set up on ironing boards so that they can raise and lower it. And I thought that was actually pretty ingenious.
Yeah.
But, at the office, provided healthy snacks. We have no control over what you get from your refrigerator when you're working from home. So what happens to the physical environment in this work from home world? So two parts of the question. Is the physical environment important in building that culture and a productive workforce? And what happens to it when we move to home offices?
Well, I just want to say real quick, Shell, that what your company did is like a calling card. It's like a catalog of what is possible when you build things the right way. The way the statement that makes about incorporating all that, which is presumably for the benefit of society, but also of all the workers. So I mean, that says a powerful message. The worst kind of thing is to go someplace where you go into a construction company that's going to build something beautiful and the place is trashed out. It's they say, well, we're not the big fancy building. We just got a bunch of stuff here. We're builders. But I think you're making a really big, impactful statement when you do that.
So Shell, I would say yes, but with an if. And we struggled with this a great deal, in that you want the environment, just as we want any environment, to immediately reflect who we are and what we believe and how we welcome. And so those physical things that make me feel the way we want and hope people feel are very important. But the if is, if we're doing other substantive things to make it a good place to work, if the way that we make decisions as an organization enables people to be heard, if we let red tape get in the way of how people get work done. I think many times in these discussions about environment and culture, it goes right to the fun stuff of giving people the chance to wash the dog at work. Well, just that's fine, but we have to realize, I think, that at the core of how people feel about where they work is how they feel about the work they get to do, and if the organization makes it easy for them to do the work they want to do. So I think it's almost as though we sometimes looked at it as, for everything we're doing right as a place to get work done and for people to feel good about that work, that gives us the permission to do something that's fun, that is more in the physical part of the environment. Now, as you look at how you translate that into a virtual world, that's where, and I've been talking with several companies where we've really looked at how do you have the home version of what you had at work, and that is literally in a box. Here are the snacks, here are the backdrops, here are all the things, and the sometimes financial support for turning whatever space you have at home into something that is as equivalent as the environment can be to what we all shared together.
And I would, I guess as communication professionals, we always talk about, we spend so much time on the words in our messages, right? And the verbal component of it. But really, the physical environment is the nonverbal component of the messages we send. And so, like both of you guys were saying, you do have to, as I'm kind of looking at my environment, I'm like, oh my God, you can see the heater in the background, right? And
I love the heater.
All this junk, yeah, I'm like, oh my God, I should have cleaned up. But you know what? I think that, Mark, what you kind of brought up in terms of, like having that conversation about what the nonverbals tell us about things. I can remember walking into offices, coming from a company and going to visit a client or something like that. And I'd walk in and, and that scan that you kind of took of the office space, and you're like, how far apart are these desks? Oh my gosh, there's no wall between the desks. Oh my gosh, there's not a plant on one desk here. And it already, nobody said a word yet. And yet we already had a sense of the message that was being sent from that environment. And so I think it really goes back to all of that. And Shell, I would love, I'm going to go out to the website and see if there's a job opening for me at that place. I'd like to be in that building.
If you go to sfrenovation.webcore.com, you can see exactly how it looks.
Very cool.
Created a microsite and just haven't got around to taking it down yet.
Oh, no, I can't. I'm going to go and look at it.
Yep. We have a question, and it's specifically a question for Ned. Brian Kilgore is asking, Ned, do the three NCIS TV shows reflect or affect the culture of the Navy and the Marines?
No.
Oh, good question.
Next question. Brian, you watch too much TV. I don't think so any more than McHale's Navy did or Hogan's Heroes. I think people know separate reality from television, and I think one of the problems you have with a show like NCIS, if you're the Navy and you go ahead and cooperate with that, because you're getting huge numbers of people that are going to get something positive and perhaps build that kind of relationship with the citizenry, that's a good thing. The bad thing is that most of the stories are about things that happened that bad people did either to the Navy or bad Navy people did to others. So there's that, there's a balance. It's that way with any kind of movie or television show or even books or magazines that the Navy cooperates with. And I will tell you, all the services have Hollywood liaison offices. I've been out to the Navy Office of Information West in Los Angeles. They all do it. I remember talking to a guy in the Pentagon who approved all the movie deals the day he said, I just found out that there's a company that wants to make a movie about the game Battleship. Now, how they're going to make a whole movie out of that game, oops, I got your Battleship. He couldn't understand it, but they did. And the Navy did cooperate with it. And the old grizzled veterans like myself saved the world. But so there's a real reason to want to participate. On the other hand, you can't control it, right? If they're going to make a really bad movie, you just say, no, you can't use our bases. You can't use our ships and aircraft as backdrops. Nevertheless, they'll find some way to do it. The really bad movies, or the ones that portray the Navy or the military in a really bad light, they'll go find some way to do it. And all the Navy people will look and say, well, that's not the way it would happen. That doesn't look real. That's fake. But they'll still find a way to do it. I think it's best when you at least cooperate, because then you have some say in how things are going to be portrayed, and offering that ability to come and shoot on the base and have that backdrop of real ships and real airplanes and real sailors. That's worth a lot. Hope that answered your question, Brian.
And going back a little bit to what Shell was asking about the importance of the physical environment versus the virtual environment, I believe that the role of the communicator in this case is reinforcing a collaborative environment. And this can be done in different ways, like, for example, offer reading hours for their employees' children, or set up a new intranet affinity sites like parenting tips channel, gardening projects, meditation tips. For example, 24-hour Zoom sessions for coworkers who simply want to work with others to chat in the background, mail letters to care or care packages to employees' homes. We can do like very different things that, of course, we are in a different situation now, but in order to really foster that collaboration, even when we are at home instead of being physically in the office, and that's something that we as communicators can really promote and push. So the people would not feel lonely even when they're at home. Not that we really feel that we still are part of a company, of a culture.
Oh, those are fabulous. And I think Lety, actually, I think now without the brick and mortar for us to gather around, those ideas like that are even more important, because one of the things that really changes when we move to a virtual environment is we all count time in different ways and in different increments. And for some people, the day is very short because it's boom, 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 zoom, zoom, zoom. And for others, it's quite long. And we have less ability to control the rhythm of how people connect than we do in a brick and mortar environment. And I think that those ideas, that those ways to help me feel that someone's still thinking about me are great.
I think that you hit an interesting point about time. And because we don't have that natural rhythm of work, I would have thought, if somebody told me that this was going to play out like this, I would have thought that the days and the weeks would drag by. But I can't believe how fast the weeks go. And if I didn't have to give my dog a shampoo every Saturday, I would have no idea what day it was.
No, and we don't move around. And it's funny, at the beginning of this, it was a novelty, and the idea, wow, I only have to walk 10 feet to go to work. And then a month later, when you can't move, you go, I'm only walking 10 feet to go to work. And I think that because we've passed from the urgency and the novelty of this way of working in March and April to the routine of it several months later, and especially as we look into different ways of virtual continuation in 2021, I think and again, Lety, your point is so important as communicators, these skills that we've always brought to the challenges that face organizations are especially needed today, because of the things that we do well, that ability to listen and to find how people may react to change is vital for organizations right now.
One of the builders of culture, I believe, is small moments. And I think Zoom has allowed us to continue to have meetings, but it doesn't give us the ability to bump into each other by the coffee machine.
No.
And this concerns me. And I find that when I talk to leaders in organizations, they're amenable to the idea of continuing to allow remote work after the pandemic ends, but not full time. You work 2 days at home and 3 days from the office. Work 3 days from home and 2 days at the office. I think this is going to be a big boost to work-life balance, which has been a challenge in a lot of industries. But it brings people back together some of the time to have some of that serendipitous connectivity that we're missing. When I worked for Allergan, they built a new R&D building, and the head of R&D had all of the walls in the hallways made of dry mark erase board. And about every 10 feet, you could find a little can with the markers and the eraser. So any two scientists who bumped into each other started chatting, could start diagramming right there on the board. How do you think that serendipitous connection would work for people in organizations where everybody is working from home?
I think it's really tough, because one of the things, if we look at our tool chest, one of the things we've always used is scheduled spontaneity. And we knew something was going to spontaneously happen because we were perhaps involved in its staging, while those who experienced it didn't realize that it had been pre-planned. It's very difficult in a virtual environment. You know, if you think about work in relationship to organization, there's always been this balance between the transactional relationship of getting work done and the emotional connection to feeling a part of the organization. Well, this machine and these machines make it really efficient for that transactional experience to continue. In fact, many people I talk with believe that we have been more productive over the past 9 months than we previously were. But what has the toll been on that emotional connection? And what I fear as we move forward is that as I become and continue to be even more isolated, and isolation becomes more routine, how will I feel about the need to be emotionally connected to the sense of purpose that an organization can bring?
Right, and have those shared experiences
Yeah.
that really drive an employee experience.
Yeah.
It's because definitely we should ask ourselves, if technology is it the only solution? Of course, it has helped a lot during all these months, but we have to wait and see the evidence. We are challenged now on how groups are working together. Socialization, belonging, cohesion, performance, innovation, and change cannot be substituted by technology. So we need to change to think about this, and maybe what you mentioned, Shell, like working a few days at home and a few days at the office, maybe that could work in a different way.
Oh, one more. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
One thing that, because I had a group of 20 people, as we looked at going to, a total virtual environment in a company, right? And so one of the things we kind of monitored or observed, and this is one instance of observations, right, as this kind of unfolded. So what we looked at is said, when we think of how it mirrors, being on site someplace and working together. So if you notice when those kind of emotional interactions occur, it's when you're walking into a room to have a meeting. But then there's that set time when the meeting is going to begin. And there's going to be that agenda. And so a lot of the things, we watched happen in this group, we said, okay, so we're starting this virtual environment. So we allotted more time to come together. So let's say the meeting starts at 10 o'clock. All right, Zoom is going to be available at 9:45, right? So that you could mirror that, but it also enabled, when the group came together to achieve its objectives, that could still be planned on as well. Now, what we saw happen over time, people said it became less and less that I needed to get there at 9:45 and have the chatty Cathy, right? They said, what? I found that I then moved into interpersonal relationships. So after they have become a part of this group, they know the people in the group. Then what they did was they said, what? I then jumped on Zoom with them for 15 minutes at a certain time. And so I think rather than talk about how as a group we come together, I think water finds its level. And I think that people do the same thing. So I think to orchestrate is probably not, let's let the thing evolve. Let it.
I think we can suggest, and I was working with some people a few months ago, and they were trying to come up with very much what you're describing, Mary. What should the new protocol for online streaming meetings be? And so we did a couple of tests. We had the group over here that was very much, we start at this time, virtual backgrounds are allowed, we end at this time, and it's all about the transaction. The group over here had flexible time both before and after, because some of us are before meeting chit-chatters and some are after meeting chit-chatters. And the key difference was, if I was over here in the chit-chat group, I couldn't use a virtual background. I had to share my space. We went through this for about 3 weeks, and then we did a little bit of an assessment, as communicators do, and we found that the group on the left, yes, they got things done and they were happy with that, but because they were scheduling themselves a little bit tighter, they felt less of a sense of relief during the day. The group that permitted the chit-chat, went into the physical space of their colleagues, actually felt that they were getting to know each other better, which to them enhanced the work experience. The big difference was the time per chit-chat, not having the concrete start and end times. But as important was this whole thing about the physical environment and getting to come into Mary's house. I get to look at Mary's environment. I get to see her heater. It reminds me she lives someplace where it's cold. And all of a sudden there's an element of the person that feels very, very connected that we didn't get at work. And so when we were in the same brick and mortar space, unless you happen to bring a photo of your heater to your office. And so I think the opportunity in many ways that this provides is, I just study people's backgrounds. And now I know that Ned collects things when he travels and puts them on the wall. I know that Lety is really well read, and I wish I could see the books on her shelf. And I know that Shell loves the movie Vertigo, and I can't wait until we chat about it, especially the scenes of old San Francisco. If we were in a physical workspace, we would not get the chance to learn these things about each other. And this is where this is actually pretty cool.
Well, I think that there's been some real advantages to being in this virtual world. I talked to one guy who he said, I used to had to go to a couple of conferences, but a lot of times there were conflicts. I'd have to pick one because I'd have to travel. I'd be there for 3 days, have to come back. Now I can actually go to 3 conferences and symposiums in the same week. I can do 3 times as many of those meetings. It's exhausting, but it's something I couldn't do before. And then I've had some people that talk to me about a big workshop they did at the Naval Postgraduate School. And they said that by doing it virtually, so all their students were basically logging in from home and participating, but they were able to have students from Singapore. They had a Marine who was an exchange student at the Colombian Naval Academy. He was able to log in and participate. And they had a lot of mentors and guests and facilitators that probably couldn't have taken the time away from their job, paid for the travel, taken the jet lag aboard, and participated by going to Monterey, but they could do it virtually. So it does open up some opportunities that are a positive that we didn't really have before.
Yeah, by the way, one of the features of Zoom that I have found myself being pulled into more frequently is the ability to separate people out into small group rooms, which is every time that I've been involved in one of those, it's been very strategic, right? We are going to break out, you're going to have this discussion, and the facilitator in your group will report back. I haven't heard of anybody yet saying, before the meeting starts, we're going to break you out into small groups so that you can chat. And then we'll come back and start the meeting, just like you would if you were in an auditorium for a town hall meeting, chatting with the people sitting near you. I think that could work well. I also wanted to mention, before we leave the physical environment element of environment, I have a friend who runs a design company that one of the things they do is environmental communication. And one example, he had a client that was a pharmaceutical company, and it was highly specialized. The drug they made is one that allowed cancer patients to extend their lives a little bit, right? So if you want to make it to your daughter's wedding, for example, and that's beyond the point where you're going to survive, this drug will probably get you there. They're very proud of being able to do this, but it's sort of an oppressive emotional thing to deal with. And the client asked, Michael, is there something that we can do with the walls to make this more uplifting? And so they did a lot of research and ended up in parts of the building painting quotes from people who had used the drugs and their families about what it meant to them to get that brief extension. Are you aware of organizations that think about how the environment communicates to that kind of overt level?
Yeah. I've got a great example. If you've ever had the opportunity to go to St. Jude's Medical Center in Memphis, it's a huge children's cancer research institute and hospital. And the rooms where the kids are and their parents are with them are right next to the researchers. So it alternates: research facility, research lab, patient room, research lab. And so every patient in there is aware that right next to them, literally right next to them, is somebody working on a cure that maybe won't be done in time for them, but maybe for the next kid. And every researcher gets to see the reason that they're working on the cure or the drug or the remedy or the treatment. They get to see exactly why they're doing it right next to them every day. I think that's a powerful way to build that type of environment. So it works both ways in that case.
Well, and I think, Shell, if we look at the many roles that we play as communicators in this discussion, certainly at the front end of a work environment or culture, we're part of the diagnosis and determining what an organization can be, and then as that experience is delivered, we're very involved in actually making certain that these things happen. I think when it comes to reinforcing the environment and nurturing and helping sustain that culture, the very things, Ned, that you're describing are essential. So that people, whether they walk into the physical or virtual environment, are surrounded by the postcards. I love to describe them as the postcards of the experience that I want to remember and that I want to share with other people. And I go back to the early years at Southwest, and I think the truth was there wasn't really a budget for a lot of artwork in the new building. And so the idea was created of, let's just simply take snapshots at all the various events that were held for employees. And so if you walked into this brand new Southwest building, and this is like 1989, you were surrounded by all these postcards of people who loved working there. And it did remind you of this is why I'm here. And I think we in our tool chest, we want to remind people of this is how it feels.
And those are real people. They're not the kind of stock photos of people in a chrome and glass matrix conference room that don't work at your company. And it don't convey anything about what your company is.
But one of my favorite things was when I was in the hospital world. Every time in our hospital that a baby was born, you heard a chime. And if you think about all the different life experiences that happen in a hospital, and those that are happy and those that aren't, just that reminder of life beginning every time you heard the chime could be what you absolutely needed to hear at that moment when something far less optimistic was occurring. I just love that.
Babies can do that for you.
I have the hospital near me is actually playing a tune. I can't remember what the tune is, but every time they discharge a COVID patient.
Oh, I did.
Yes. Something that we just wanted to give an example of something we did when I used to work for Merck. We had a product, a medicine that we donated all over the world to cure river blindness, to avoid river blindness. And so at the entrance of the corporate offices in New Jersey, there was a blind man that was guided by a child because he couldn't see, and that there was a statue that was over there. So we decided to do something similar in Mexico because we had this donation of this product in Mexico for 3 states, in Oaxaca and Chiapas and another one. So we had a lot of volunteer work in Chiapas with our own people with this medicine, and we had a lot of employees who went there to donate them the product. So we had a lot of photographs and images of our own people going to these brigades and to support and to help the people on those states. And that was in a specific place around the company, around the offices, with the people there doing this. So it was part of the environment that we had over there.
I believe I've seen a statue just like that in the lobby of the World Bank, which takes some of the credit for the end to river blindness. In terms of how we work, and we alluded to this a little bit earlier in the conversation, the importance of purpose and vision and values has been elevated over the last several years. Mary, you referred to what the Business Roundtable has done, talking about stakeholders rather than shareholders. First, again, does this need to be reflected in the physical environment? And second, what does it do to an organization when the way work is done is not aligned with the values that the organization proclaims?
Well, then you got a big problem, Shell. I think this is, and I think this is again where the unique skills that we bring are so important, is to get underneath that. I do think that for as much as we talk about and need to focus on the things that we can do to create an emotional connection between people who work together, that ability to get work done and how we work, and how much courage I can bring to my work, and what I'm afraid of, and how the organization either makes me feel courageous or makes me feel more afraid. And unless we really focus on getting those things right and helping our managers get those things right, all the photographs on the wall aren't going to make a difference if what I actually experience at work is contrary to what I see on the walls.
You think about Enron, they had wonderful core values. And I'm sure that many of the employees were dedicated,
yes,
and very ethical employees. But at the very top, it was rotted to the core. And look what it did to that organization and all the stakeholders involved with it. So they had the talk, but they didn't walk the talk.
One of the things I do is whenever there's a crisis along the lines of an Enron or a Wells Fargo, I go visit their website and find their values. And usually they run exactly opposite of the behavior that you saw exhibited at the top of the organization.
Well, I think one of the things, we had the report that came out from the GA. I'm trying to think if it came out Wednesday. What are we? Thursday? Maybe it came out Tuesday. But I think one of the things that we talk about, because we act like in the sense of a role of a communication professional, like anybody can just go in and make these changes or foster this collaboration. When I think if we look at this in terms of a communication function and what it can do. And this really goes to looking at the function in the organization and what it can move forward, right? What it can move the needle on realistically. And then looking at the individual communication professional in terms of their career level. So the way that so much of what we've talked about today is really that business leader level. So when we're looking at culture, and if you think of all the stories and even the questions that you had, Shell, I mean, these are stories that come from knowing companies and knowing how companies work and what their purpose is. And I think the whole idea of that business leader career path is finally coming into its own. And you can be, because of your position and the influence that you can bring to it, I think the communication professional is the natural choice. And I know we saw Annenberg earlier this year came out with their research. And they were, there was a little hullabaloo, right? Because, communication could integrate and dovetail into marketing. And I am a marketer, and I'm saying, no, marketing has a different function in the organization than the strategic communication professional has in the organization. The marketer is like when I put a resume together to apply for a job. Everybody expects me to look really good on that resume. Just like in marketing, when we go out the door to market a product, the company is supposed to look good. It's supposed to look like what it knows what it's doing, right? But it's almost like you need that strategic communication function to actually be the voice of the organization. And I don't think another function can do it. I don't think HR can do it. I don't think ops. I don't think
a lawyer can't do it.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think it goes back to a word that many times we've used to describe the communicator's role, and that is as the company's conscience. And I think at different times in the world that means different things. I think what you're describing, Mary, is absolutely correct. That if we aren't making certain, or at least asking the questions for others to consider of what we have to be to actually tell the stories we want to tell, then we're not doing our job. And it's that communicator ability to listen and to curate and to connect and to communicate, and sometimes to issue caution that if we don't fix some things that need to be addressed, then we cannot be what we say we want to be.
I had a presentation I gave once in India. I had a number of agency people there, but one of the people attending that was the chief executive officer of a airline, Indigo Airlines. And at one point I said, so who is responsible for communication in your organization? And he said, I am. And I thought that was a very interesting statement. But I know he has people that help him, because that's why he was probably at that presentation. But I thought it was interesting that the buck stops here. That's a good.
Well, as Mary, as we've talked many times in the classroom, and when I was teaching MBA students, they would come into this communication class, they would say, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to take this class," and they would leave realizing that their ability. They want people to assess them based on what they decide and how they think. And without their communication skills, how will anyone be able to do that? And this light bulb used to just go off that, wow, I need to be able to do just what you described, Ned.
We just have
it's not something that you communicate just 1 second. You have to communicate over and over and over again for the message to sink in.
We have less than 3 minutes left, and I can't leave the topic without asking, how do we measure all of this? We work for leaders who are numbers driven. And this is a serious intangible we're talking about, the environment, even though we can probably point to elements of it. The impact it has on productivity or engagement seems a little nebulous. How do you report on the impact of this to the leaders of the organization?
The best way to do it is use metrics that they understand, not just that communicators understand.
Right. And I think that this is where the partnership that Lety described with HR is so essential. Certainly, our measuring elements within the culture are important to our work, but ultimately, it's about the ability to acquire and to retain the key people we need. If we aren't a place where people want to come to do their best work, we're not going to be able to accomplish what senior leaders want. So that partnership with talent acquisition, or whatever it's called in an organization, is vital.
And you want to be perceived as something other than overhead. You want to be contributing to the bottom line ultimately somehow.
Well, and I think it's the whole concept of, like, we think we want to belong to an organization, and we walk in the door and we kind of look and we say, oh, I would like to stay here forever, right? But the reality is, people evolve and mature, quicker than organizations. And so you do see the movement. And I like the whole idea in HR of the alumni networks, because essentially they're part of that culture too, right?
Right. And that the relationship doesn't end. Yeah.
And we have one of those going on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We are out of time. I just have enough time left to thank everybody for what has been a great discussion. I love the ones where I get to sit back and only get 4 or 5 questions out because the conversation it sort of takes care of itself. Also want to thank Anna Willie for her behind the scenes work to make sure that we have a panel. And I want to let you know what's coming next month on January 21st, and it's a different time than usual. It will be at 3 p.m. Eastern, and this is to accommodate a couple of panelists who are in far-flung time zones. The panel will include Priya Bates from Canada, Adrian Cropley from Australia, Martha Muzichka from Canada, Ritzi Ronquillo from the Philippines, and Jennifer Waugh from Canada. So I will actually be the only American on the panel. And that will be on January 21st at 3 p.m. And it should be a rather robust conversation, communication highlights of 2020.
Ooh.
And there have been lots and lots of them. So I hope to see all of you out there for that panel, and hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Holiday. Bye-bye.
Bye.